As I said at the top of the show, a new study released earlier this year on the impact black teachers have on black students got a lot of attention nationally because it's rather remarkable findings. And we have one of the authors of that study with us today, Dr. Constance Lindsay from Urban Institute in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
Now, let's first talk about your research.
Sure.
It garnered a lot of attention, and that's why we invited you on the show. How did you study the impact that African-American teachers have on black students?
So basically, this is administrative data from North Carolina. What's nice is the Department of Public Instruction here keeps records on students and makes them available to researchers. So we were able to look at over 100,000 student records of black students entering third grade between 2001 and 2005. And what's nice about the administrative data is that you're then able to look and see, did they go to high school? When did they graduate? Did they go to college? And so basically what we end up finding is that having at least one black teacher in grades 3, 4, or 5 leads to decreased rates of dropout and higher rates of attending college.
So so the data that's available, I mean, obviously this isn't identified by name,
Right,
but this matches up the students, and so you know what the demographics and the race of the students and the teachers. So you've been able to track really for an entire sort of 12 years,
Yes,
if you will,
yes,
right?
yes.
So that's what really got me when I saw the initial news reports. Just one teacher, just one black teacher for a black student made a big impact. How big of an impact in terms of dropout rates?
So for all students, it's about 30%, and then we found even larger impacts for what we defined as persistently low income young black boys. And so those are students who were eligible for free and reduced price lunch the entire time they were in elementary school.
So you talked about, in addition to dropout rates, you also tracked likelihood of attending college. Now, how do you determine that based on data?
So when you graduate from high school in North Carolina, you fill out a little survey that says, I'm going to attend a 4-year college, I'm going to attend a 2-year college, or I'm not going to college at all. So it's basically a signal of your intent to attend college. So we're able to see that.
Do you, now we titled this episode Black Teachers Matter.
Okay.
Because
Yes.
it seemed pretty much
Yeah.
that it did, and it was just, again, you've got the data. I trust the data because
Yes.
I've looked at your report, and we do
Okay.
have it on our website,
Okay,
so folks
great.
who want to look at all the information. But it's definitely a valid and clear difference. Just one teacher.
Just one black teacher. But I think that gives us a little bit of hope, right? So one of the things we know nationally, both in North Carolina, is that we don't have the numbers of teachers of color that we'd like. But if it's just one, I think maybe we can think about how we distribute our current teachers to maybe get some better results for our kids.
All right, so it begs the question, if you get better results from just having one black teacher, does it make a difference if you have 2, 3, 4 throughout your school career?
That's a really good question. So we're only looking at those elementary school years for this particular study. And what we found is if you just sort of limit it to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, it's just one during that time period. So it's not a real difference if you have 2 or if you have them in a particular order. So no dosage or timing effects.
Right. Now, you've obviously looked at the demographics, for all students. Did you see similar effects for, say, white students with white teachers or white students with black teachers?
So that's a great question. So for this particular study, we just limited the analyses to black students and sort of looking at that comparison between having a white teacher and a black teacher during those years. In some of our other studies, we also look at the impacts for white students and usually find that there's no negative impact of white students having a black teacher.
Right. Were you able to tell, because you can see where the schools are, were there any differences at all across the state? This was a pretty wide swath of data. So you had urban, rural, east, west, no difference at all?
So we didn't look at sort of where the schools were. This is just statewide. So we literally have every single school in the state. So this is sort of the average impact across the entire state.
All right, let me shift gears a little bit, although we're going to continue to talk about that, so in particular in our next segment too, because I do want to explore and have a conversation about why.
That's right.
Because, and then sort of what do we do about it. But you also did a study looking at discipline disparity. It's something we've talked about on this show. So again, what are we talking about when we talk about discipline, exclusionary discipline? What are we talking about?
So we also use the same set of administrative data to look at students at all levels, elementary, middle, high school, over the years of 2008 to 2013. And basically what we found is that being matched to a black teacher teacher leads to lower levels of exclusionary discipline. So these are, when you're suspended out of school, in school, expulsion. So the sort of more harsh disciplines that students might receive.
Do these tend to be the ones that are more subjective disciplines? Because I know that in North Carolina, the expulsions and things are sort of marked. You've got things like, if you bring a gun to school, you get caught with drugs to school, it's sort of an automatic. There's almost like mandatory minimums in the criminal justice. But does the disparity show up when it's more subjective?
That's right. So we find that most of the effects are driven by what we call willful defiance acts, and those are the ones that have the most teacher discretion. So those are the ones that involve teachers reading students' behavior, and so we think there's something about that match that maybe causes Black teachers to read students' behavior differently than other teachers.
And so, but now, did you see, again, I'll ask you this sort of similar question. You've got the data, so did you see any difference in terms of white students? I mean, white students being treated better, worse, the same, depending on the race of the teacher?
So we found, so we have some earlier versions of the study where we found that basically everybody does better when they have an African-American woman teacher. And not that I'm biased or anything, that's just what happened. But we also found some interesting sort of delineations. We found that for low-income white men, they also do better with having a Black teacher. So there might be some cultural things that are happening.
Fascinating. Well, we're gonna continue this conversation. We're gonna add on our next guest, but so when we come back, I'm gonna introduce you to Atreus Good from Durham, from a movement of youth. But first, see if you can answer this question, viewers. In 1989, 1 in 50 Black students in Charlotte attended a hyper-segregated school. That is a student with a minority student population of 90 to 100%. What was that ratio in 2010?